Hello and welcome to yet another podcast webinar for Iron Edge Group. We are still in a pandemic.
Almost.
Yeah.
We're almost out of it.
That's good. I feel like at some point it'll be an epidemic. It's like a downgrade from a pandemic. So that'll be great for us. But it's been fantastic for us to figure out how to do webinars and things like that. If you look on the sunny side of life, it's been a good opportunity for us to really get this sort of technology down. And we appreciate everybody who's joining us today. So my name is, before I get into that, today we're going to be talking about perimeter security and our partners over at Cisco, their product line, Meraki, which we love. And Patrick actually brought to us back even before they were a Cisco company. We've been working with Meraki for damn near 7 or 8 years now, a long time. So we really like the product. We stand behind it. Patrick is a huge fan of it and brought it to our organization. So we're going to talk about their SD WAN, their software-defined WAN technology. So a little bit about who's going to be doing this presentation today. Today is me. I am the COO of Iron Edge Group, and I do what I can to try to help out when it comes to our webinars and our podcasts, and just kind of be available to talk about all the things that I slightly know or know very little of, and I fake my way through. And then I've got Patrick, my ISA, who's the real subject matter expert here. Why don't you give a little background on yourself there, sir?
Look at that young man in that picture. That was probably the week before the pandemic started. That's what I'm going to say. When I looked 10 years younger and a lot less hair.
No gray hair.
Right.
No gray hair.
My name is Patrick. I'm here at Iron Edge for, I guess, close to 11 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I work as account management within the company, as well as, oftentimes we'll work as a virtual CIO or CTO for organizations and help them, engineer and architect their IT strategies and how it meets their business goals. And significantly in the past couple of years, there's a lot of security focus, which, we talk about the Meraki product. Certainly has a lot of those bells and whistles that help make things easier for organizations to do a lot of the security stuff. So we're a big champion of the products, and so we continue to use them, adopt them, and love that they're making inroads and adding new features, especially on the security side. And so that really helps organizations keep on top of the latest threats, for sure.
Absolutely. So one of the things we like to start with is kind of what's in the news, what's happening. And I know that for most of the folks that are listening to this, and even the layman in some regards, that everybody knows about SolarWinds. So it's not really breaking news, but we did want to talk about it because the CEO of Microsoft had a really interesting take on it. And Satya had talked about SolarWinds underscoring the hack of that particular product, underscoring the need for moving to the cloud, right? Which I thought was a really interesting take on it because a lot of people understood what happened. So just kind of a quick breakdown of what happened with SolarWinds. So if you don't know, SolarWinds is an application usually installed in an environment that is on premise or at a colo. It's physical infrastructure, and there are there's a virtual service, but usually it's an on-prem owned infrastructure, and there are agents on it, and it uses credentials to go out and basically monitor and understand how to maintain your network and server environment. It takes all that information back, and it provides you a really clean dashboard so you can see what's going on. And there's a lot of keys to the kingdom when you have a piece of software that does that. And so what Microsoft's position was, at least your CEOs, was moving those assets to the cloud eliminates the need for something as onerous as SolarWinds, right? And that should be something that organizations see as a potential liability to owning assets and not moving them to the cloud, which is prescient for us in this conversation because it really underscores the importance of moving to the cloud and how Meraki helps with that and what SD WAN is, and kind of looking at virtual switching virtual operating systems, virtual infrastructure, all being moved into a cloud-based solution, and really moving the goalpost, so to speak, when it comes to the edge of your network from being the firewalls and switches and routers that we're traditionally used to seeing, to starting to push those towards almost a full cloud switching environment, and how we see Meraki and Cisco moving in that direction with their product line, right? So that was one of the things.
Yeah, jump in, Andrew. So it's a great point, but I want to kind of drive that home. So really, traditionally speaking, everyone in the industry over the past 20 years has really been focused on having that infrastructure in their office, right? In their on-prem, where all the applications and software that the company would use to run their business lived on their servers. And so really what you're doing is you're building those walls and fortresses around and protecting the corporate infrastructure. But really over the past 10 years or so, the technology has caught up where a lot of this stuff can now live in the cloud, right? And so you have hosted applications like SaaS applications that live in the cloud, and there's a slow march to the cloud where a lot of this stuff's starting to live. And so that frees up a lot of people from having to work in an office space, and especially in this pandemic situation where people are working from home, being able to access all of those resources from any location is a critical part of being able to continue your business from a business continuity standpoint. And so protecting that is becoming more and more of a challenge, right? And so you're not protecting your office anymore. You're needing to protect all of the data and applications that live up in the cloud. And so, as you mentioned, not only are these applications moving up to the cloud, but so goes your network, right? So you're seeing a shift from on-prem protection to being able to protect everything that's now in the cloud. And so over the next few years, you'll see more and more people start shifting not only their servers and applications up to the cloud, but their networks as well. And so that's what we're seeing in the industry over the past few years, and continuing to see that over the next few years.
Yeah, and we really see, Meraki as being that step towards those systems, right? A reason that we wanted to move towards looking at the Meraki stack years ago was that it was that bridge that began to move you from locally configured systems where, you were having to monitor and maintain those through some sort of like kind of cobbled together kind of semi-cloud based system. And you would have to do, config backups, and you could push stuff down, but you had to have certain ports open and SSH and all this other stuff, and, SFTP. And so with the Meraki systems, it really is a software defined firewall that is basically being pushed down into a piece of equipment. And those configurations are stored in their cloud environment. Now, the systems will run offline, obviously, if they can't connect to the cloud. They'll maintain a copy of their config, but it makes it so much more effective to be able to manage multiple systems, to get alerts in one single dashboard, to be able to go in and create a configuration prior to deployment, or to be able to replicate a configuration that you currently have into another environment very easily. And so we're watching this march towards moving the edge into virtual switching, virtual routing, virtual firewalling in SaaS-based application software as a service, or infrastructure as a service like in Azure. We're watching this sort of thing start to happen. And we're not entirely sure as far as what Cisco's like 5-year roadmap is for this product, but what it feels like to us is that this is the natural progression of, at one point you'll just be able to put the Meraki virtual configuration that you had into a virtual appliance in the cloud, or onto a scripted interface that does, basically virtual networking for you. And that whole edge is going to move into a cloud, so that the only thing that you have at your local offices is just a direct internet connection, right? You don't even have to necessarily firewall what's behind it at some point. It's very interesting to see it as it's happening.
To tie it back to SD-WAN is, again, a lot of corporations invested heavily on their connectivity, right? So they would spend tons of money on reliable fiber connections and MPLS connections to connect sites together. And that's very expensive. And so where SD-WAN comes into play is it allows you to really take advantage of some of the cheaper internet connectivity that's out there, like cable modems and DSL modems, and even cellular as we're getting into 5G and beyond. Right, we're getting fast speeds, but you're not having to invest heavily and get locked in necessarily with very expensive contracts with ISPs, because what software defined wide area networks do is it looks at those connections, and it sees the health of those connections, right? And so it as we talked about before, when you're hosting these applications in the cloud, like Office 365 is a good example, you want to be able to make sure that when you're accessing those services and resources in the cloud, like 365, that you have a good connection, and that's a healthy connection, right? And so if you're starting to use maybe less reliable connections, you want to ensure that you're not compromising that healthy connection to either 365 or whatever service you're using in the cloud. And so where SD-WAN comes into play is if you have multiple connections to your home office, and it's maybe like a cellular or a cable modem, it'll look at the health of that connection, and it's smart enough to say, okay, Office 365 over this cable connection may not be performing very well. So there's thresholds that you can set, and it'll swing that over to your secondary connection and make sure that, when you're trying to access these services, you're doing it in a way that's reliable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into some of the details of the differences, but kind of like just a little bit about what SD-WAN is, and more specifically like how Meraki handles the SD-WAN stuff, which is really interesting, how well that it's been put together. What I did want to touch on briefly before we move on is just, what is Meraki good at? And one of the things that we've talked about is that, interestingly enough, we've seen this push as everybody's moving things to the cloud, where the initial response from a lot of our clients say, well, we've moved to the cloud, therefore we don't need to spend money on our infrastructure, right, at our offices and things like that. And what we've said is, no, you probably, let's say you averaged out, $5,000 to $10,000 a year or more on, let's just go with a really low number, on server maintenance and upkeep and whatever on your asset lifecycle management process. Now you're thinking, well, I don't have to do that anymore. And I've got these old switches, but they seem to do a good job. And I've got an older firewall and it seems to be doing okay. And to Patrick's point earlier, what we see as being the new normal is that whatever that IT spend was that you were putting into server and compute, a portion of it, if not a large portion of it, should be shifted back into the network, because if everything's in the cloud, the connectivity to the cloud is the most important thing. You can get away with a local network and have dropped packets and things like that. And it's a little frustrating, but it's not catastrophic. If you can't get to your applications in the internet or prioritize traffic, as everything is now in the internet, where you've got people like potentially streaming movies, either they're, doing it, against company policy or because of some function of their job, or they're downloading large files, or things are moving around. You've got your phone systems going through the internet now. All of this stuff is traversing this stack of switches and these firewalls. We find that the Meraki solution excels at being able to create this complete layered solution that interconnects to one another and allows you to seamlessly prioritize traffic, the VLAN stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about it more in a few minutes, but they've got great layer 7 rules that can be applied at the firewall level that'll traverse through the switch stack. Like, there's just a lot of cool stuff. And I don't like to use the word cool too much in technology, because I think it makes it sound like, there's not a business purpose for it, but it really helps you run your business more effectively because of the way that the applications all work together. And I think that that's a key takeaway for Meraki's core value to a business. And one of the reasons I think Patrick, gravitated towards them years ago is we've used them in a few of our clients.
It simplifies it too. It makes it very elegant. It's very clean, and it's a one pane of glass solution where it just makes everything easy. Like in the days of old, when we were getting into firewalls and networking equipment, you have to be that command line commando person and know all the all the commands to get stuff done. The Meraki solution is just very elegant and it allows you to do it easily, and it masks all of the complication behind the scenes.
Yeah. And it's a nice, you're not quite, so there's the consumer level stuff, right? You've got your ACEs, routers and firewalls, Linksys switches and things like that. That's like kind of your consumer grade. And you got your prosumer grade, which is a little bit of that stuff, Ubiquity, some of those others where it's like, like kind of the more professional side, baby company type, 5 to 10 user maybe environment that might be able to utilize some of that equipment. Then the Meraki is really for organizations that are, not at the enterprise level, that aren't doing like weird, configured, super huge wide area network systems with, core switching and co-locations and stuff like that. Although it does support a lot of those, but it's not that super enterprise level where you're going to have like redundant core switches and like all sorts of weird stuff. Like it's a very good solution for most small to mid-sized companies, depending on what their switch deck looks like.
I'll add that, as more and more people are shifting to the cloud, they don't need that complicated stuff anymore. And so we're seeing enterprise organizations that we support start adopting some of this easier to manage equipment because they don't need it anymore. Like all of their complicated networking stuff has gone away because they started to use cloud-based solutions, and so they can simplify their environment. And that's, from a management standpoint, that's the end goal, right?
Yeah, and having done this for at this point 20 years, and for the folks that are going to be listening to this or watching it, we know that people that know how to do advanced level networking and have that skill set are not cheap to have on your team or to outsource to. And so, coming up with a networking solution that might be a little easier to maintain, update, and configure is actually really great for a lot of businesses, especially if it stays pretty static or is smart enough to make its own adjustments, as you can configure some of the Meraki stuff to do, so that you're not having that support cost that comes with these environments. And one of the cooler things it does is it will self-update, which is really nice, because if you're an admin, you know how difficult sometimes it is if you need to update your equipment, making sure that you've got backups of the configs, and that you make sure that you are available in case the piece of equipment goes offline. And there's all these things that kind of line into that. Meraki makes it really easy to have this stuff scheduled. You can obviously turn some of that off, but it takes the guesswork out of how to remember that your firewall might be out of date and unsecure. So one of the things that we wanted to get into today just a little bit is kind of the portal that you use in order to manage the Meraki systems. Branson is unable to be with us today, but he was able to put together a great video demo that I'm going to share with everybody on the Meraki portal and the ease of use and its configuration. So I'm going to get into that real quick here and show everybody how that works. And so I will currently try to get in here and stop share and share my screen over here. All right, everybody. This is our good friend Branson.
Hi, my name is Branson Braid, and I'm a systems engineer here at Iron Edge Group. Thanks for joining us for this walkthrough of the Meraki dashboard portal and a brief overview of how Meraki provides simplification of management and deployment for firewalls, switches, and wireless devices. We'll also give a brief overview of SD WAN with Meraki. Let's jump right in. For today's overview, we're going to take advantage of Meraki's live demo online. Here, they provide a very brief overview of all the devices that you're currently managing. In the top, you'll find your networks that you currently have defined and some brief information about them. name, usage, clients, and also the network types. For today's demo, we're going to take advantage of our live demo firewall. Once inside your network, Meraki provides a wealth of information just on this homepage. From the network-wide settings, you have the options for you to monitor your clients as well as configure any settings necessary for the firewall. This homepage also provides a lot of detailed information on how the firewall is set up. Your uplink will provide you information on your WAN IP address as it pertains to your WAN and perimeter security, as well as easy tools available for you to troubleshoot on the go. You have the availability for you to easily reboot your device, or if you need to verify that a device is at the current site that you're checking, you can run blink LEDs. When we talk about perimeter security, it's important to remember that a firewall is made to control ingress and egress, or inbound and outbound traffic. In order to do this, Meraki allows us to control firewall settings with the click of a button. Here, we have our Layer 3 firewall rules, controlling inbound and outbound traffic. There's one rule set, just to control the access over port 25. In addition to Layer 3, we also have Layer 7 firewall rules. Layer 7 controls access at the application layer. If we want to block all gaming on a network, we can easily do so by putting a Layer 7 firewall rule in place. We then can control exactly what kind of service we're allowing in or blocking for those users. We also have the option to prioritize this traffic if necessary. One of Meraki's main industry differentiators is their ability to easily deploy remote sites. This can be done over a site-to-site VPN tunnel in a full mesh topology or a hub and spoke. Their availability for rolling out these networks is key on being able to control traffic between sites. This can be done by turning VPN on and off for these local networks. Here, your sales network is turned on, meaning that the traffic is allowed to go over the VPN tunnel to your remote site. Once these sites are up and available, they can easily be viewed within your VPN status located within your security and SD WAN monitoring. While the Meraki portal provides great insight to multiple firewalls across disparate locations, single pane of glass management for multiple network switches allows for granular control at the user endpoint. For this, we'll take a look at our demo switches. Here, we're provided a quick overview again of our switches that are available, that are offline, alerting, or online. We also have the availability to see these switches over the past 2 hours or over the past month. While Meraki provides exceptional monitoring tools for remote systems, they also provide a simplicity for configuration. For this example, we'll look at their port scheduling options. Meraki makes it easy to shut off ports on switches that aren't needed. For some businesses, it's best to have ports only available during weekdays and during business hours. You can alter this to make it accessible for weekend users, or just leave all ports always on. As we've been shown, Meraki provides great control over how users connect to our network, but not just our physical network, our wireless access points as well. On our dashboard page, again, we're provided devices that are offline, alerting, or currently online. For our wireless access points, we have many more devices than our switches. So the question is, how do we find what we need? we have an easy search tool, so let's search for library devices. Here, we're given our 9 devices. But one of my favorite tools built into the Meraki dashboard is the ability to filter what information is readily available to you. From my list of wireless access points, I can currently see the status and connectivity, as well as the name. But if I want to add items such as device serial number and IP addresses, all I have to do is add them in the settings located here on the right. While we've taken time to talk about Meraki's extensive hardware monitoring capabilities, it's important to include their rollout of SD-WAN, or Software-Defined Wide Area Networks. These settings for your firewall can be found under Security in SD-WAN and SD-WAN Traffic Shaping. Meraki SD-WAN lets you control how traffic is directed and prioritized across multiple uplinks, and enables your network to immediately and intelligently adapt to changing performance conditions. Under SD-WAN policies, you have the option to control traffic based on VPN traffic or custom performance classes. Under VPN traffic, there are presets already provided by Meraki for easy deployment of filters. Again, we're going to take advantage of the gaming filter and use some of the presets in order for us to prioritize traffic based on the system that we're using. Here, Meraki gives us the preference for us to choose an uplink based on our internet service provider. As well, we can choose when the link chooses to fail over based on performance or if the uplink fails. You can also create performance classes. Policies can also be built based on specific custom performance class requirements. These requirements can be based on application needs or services such as voice over IP or video conferencing. Services experiencing limits on jitter or noise over their network link can utilize Meraki SD-WAN to ensure that services such as VoIP have the throughput and optimization that they need. Again, we're not going to save any of our configuration. Instead, we're going to go back to where we started, our Meraki dashboard home screen. We're going to do so under Networks by going to View All Networks. This is going to take us back to our geographical view of where all of our devices within our Meraki dashboard are located. In the top, I want to point out that this is a live demo, that there are more sections that we can go more in depth on. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to Iron Edge Group. Again, this is Branson Braid, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Dang, Branson's amazing.
Good, right?
He did a good job.
Yeah.
That was actually really, really good. I hope everybody could hear it and see it fine. I got front row view here on my computer. So that's a lot of what the Meraki interface does. We kind of got into some of the stuff that the SD-WAN does, which I think is important. We do need to talk a little bit about but what SD-WAN is, and why it exists and what's important about it. Because I know that there's a lot of folks out there that may not. I mean, I was kind of ignorant of kind of SD-WAN at first. So I do want to get into that a little bit. So one of the things that we talk about with SD-WAN is it gives you the ability, it's software defined, right? Which sounds like a pretty simple thing to talk about, but there's a lot of different things that the SD-WAN system does. And you saw a little bit back there where it talks about traffic shaping, how it can fail over, prioritizing traffic. But like, Patrick, where do you think is like the most valuable area that SD-WAN provides an organization when it comes to building out their networks?
Sure. Yeah. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but There's several flavors of SD-WAN. There's, Meraki has one flavor. There's certainly more sophisticated. And if you want to kind of get into the nitty gritty and get more control over your environment, there's much more enterprise level SD-WAN configurations as well. Cisco's enterprise offerings provide that as well. But what's interesting is that, with the Meraki solution, it makes it really easy to kind of turn it on. Like I alluded to it earlier, but oftentimes a lot of organizations, especially with multiple locations, is they would interconnect those offices with MPLS connections or VPN connections. And MPLS is very expensive to run across multiple locations. But really, it's a layer 2 connection, and there's not a lot of control of what goes in and out of that pipe, right? You can certainly put in some filters and controls in there, but it's really just like it's an open pipe that just goes back and forth, and it's really hard to control. So where the software defined WAN comes into play is it gives you a lot of that higher level layer 7 control of the type of traffic that's going across that connection, right? So it knows that it's voice traffic, or it knows that you're trying to access files over at Office 365, or say you have, Salesforce, and that's a critical component of your organization. So you can define that these certain services are important to your organization, and you want to provide them a higher level of connectivity. And so that's where the software defined characteristics come into play, where it's not just, dumb packets, ones and zeros, but it knows the type of traffic that's going back and forth, and it optimizes it, right? So it's smart enough to say, okay, maybe this connection has a pretty poor or noisy connection for whatever reason. Like maybe there's line congestion, or there's problems on that internet provider. It knows that, well, I'm not getting a good connection to this service. So I want to send it over another connection that I have that may be more healthy. And that ensures that, if you're on a phone call over your voice traffic, that you're not seeing any sort of big interruptions to that traffic. And so that's where it comes into place, and allows you to connect to a lot of different locations, whether it's your own offices or cloud service providers, in a way that's reliable and it continues to keep high levels of connectivity to these services.
Well, I think one of the more interesting developments over the last couple of years is, we've seen a lot of talk one way or the other about 5G, but just from the ability of having, we'll talk about it from a cellular perspective, right? Whether that's LTE or 4G or 5G, there's the opportunity to interface that connectivity into these devices, right? And provide a more robust internet experience for places that don't typically get good internet connection, whether that's a trailer at a construction site, or that could be a well management facility out, in the middle of Midland or some West Texas area, where you're out there dealing with over a satellite type connection, and then to be able to integrate cellular into this gives you that blended connection, because frankly, all the things that people are using now are all in the cloud, and not having to traverse VPNs and whatnot, and just giving them a more stable general internet connection with the SD-WAN, I think is really important, right?
That's exactly right. As you're becoming more reliant on internet-based services, then your network connectivity, your internet connectivity is your main concern, right? You want to make sure that you have not only a internet connection, but probably multiple internet connections, and that you're using them efficiently. So if you have a primary connection like a cable modem, a secondary connection that might be less than ideal, and maybe even a third one that could be cellular, that if all of them fails, maybe someone cut a line down the street and killed every internet connection, you can always fail over to a cellular one. And cellular is certainly good enough to get you by. It's fast enough these days that you can run and be able to function. And that way, if your lifeblood lives in the cloud, like your email or whatever that might be, you're not going to miss a beat if something happens.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that the Meraki Cisco SD-WAN does really well, which you had touched on a minute ago, that really augments some of the core functionality of the SD-WAN that Cisco has in Meraki in particular is the layer 7 shaping, right? And I find that it's incredibly useful, not just from the SD-WAN perspective, but we all know that as things are moving to the cloud, the idea of whitelisting a series of IP addresses in order for your organization to securely access cloud-based systems can be a bit onerous, because not everything lives in one specific IP block anymore if you're trying to get to office.com, let's say. So being able to use the layer 7 filtering allows you to prioritize that traffic, but also lock that traffic down, which provides additional security. And it makes it a whole lot easier than constantly having to chase down IP blocks as things shift around and move, because that was, for a long time, the way things used to work. So one of the things that they really do is focus on making sure that there is more than just one component of the SD-WAN configuration that makes up that holistic approach to your edge management and cloud and SaaS service prioritization and traffic shaping. So it's actually super efficient once you start getting those things put into the systems. And again, once you get some of these configs built, they can then be replicated to other configurations. And so it becomes a very scalable solution over time, rather than having to, export a config and do a find and replace and do a bunch of stuff to import into another device. It's simply just a matter of cloning it over, which is really, 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 really effective and makes things a whole lot more secure. So that's in general what the Meraki product does. Is in the Meraki suite of products is they are cloud-based interfaces that allow you to configure network, perimeter, switching, and traffic moving devices for your digital systems. They will interface with one another across wide area networks. They're smart enough to be able to shape traffic beyond just straight IP addresses. They know how to move information back and forth based on the names of the domains in a pure layer 7 fashion. Some of the other features and functionalities that we really like from the SD-WAN standpoint focus on the ability to prioritize that traffic to fail over without having to create complicated HA configurations, right? High availability configurations, so that the systems are either up or they're down before they fail over. And so I think it really creates a really well-rounded solution for most mid to enterprise level environments, or even small businesses, depending on the type of deployment that you want to put in place. So very excited about being able to talk to you guys about this. Patrick, did I miss stuff? Did we not get to anything that we wanted to talk about today?
I think we covered it all. Yeah, I think we touched all the high points.
All right. So that's going to be it for the Iron Edge Group webinar on Meraki SD-WAN. And we should be putting together more of these in the coming weeks and months to try to educate our clients and our prospective clients and just folks out in the universe about what it is we do. Patrick, as always, it is a pleasure to see your face on something other than Instagram. So it's been nice.
Say likewise, maybe?
I'm not on Instagram, so I don't do any of that stuff. I will say, I was told that I had to figure out how to do this, and I forgot. So one of the other use cases for SD-WAN is if you're in a rack, right, with a group of people, like you're in a server closet, and somebody accidentally their butt bumps like a router and turns it off, right? Like your traffic, if you had an SD-WAN configuration and a second interface, you could actually route that traffic through the other interface seamlessly. So if Patrick happened to be in your server closet and were to accidentally bump the router and turn it off, which has never happened before, but if it were to happen,
never.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Ever.
I get money every time I work that into a webinar, by the way. Dan gives me $5.
Yeah.
Just so you know. He's pink now. Isn't that amazing? No, awesome. Thank you. Great job, Patrick. I really appreciate you being on this with us and providing us some insights into the SD-WAN stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate everyone's
Bye.
time.
See you,
Take
everybody.
care.